In the small town of Udi, life was simple. Neighbors greeted one another warmly each morning, children played under the mango trees after school, and market women filled the air with chatter and the rhythmic clatter of trading. Among the people who stood out in the community was a woman named Ngozi. To many, Aunty Ngozi was a respectable figure. She always appeared neatly dressed, her wrappers bright and well-tied, and her headscarves perfectly arranged. At community meetings, she was soft-spoken, careful with her words, and eager to impress the elders with her apparent wisdom. Her family sat in the front pews at church every Sunday, and she was quick to raise her hand when contributions were called for. To outsiders, she looked like the picture of kindness, generosity, and discipline. But behind closed doors, her heart was hardened. Ngozi's younger sister, Ifeoma, had been her closest companion growing up. The two of them had shared clothes, secrets, and laughter. But when Ifeoma married a kind man named Chike and later gave birth to a daughter, Amaka, a shadow of jealousy began to grow in Ngozi's heart. While Ngozi had her own family, she often felt that Ifeoma was favored more by fortune, that her sister's laughter was brighter, her marriage happier, and her home more peaceful. Then tragedy struck. One rainy night, Ifeoma and her husband were returning from a journey when their vehicle collided with a lorry on the highway. Both lives were lost instantly. News of the accident spread quickly, throwing the community into mourning. At the burial, many people wept uncontrollably. Amaka, just 10 years old, clung to the coffin and cried until her voice was hoarse. It was a sight that broke hearts, for everyone knew that the poor child was now an orphan. As tradition demanded, family members gathered to decide who would take care of Amaka. With an air of false compassion, Ngozi stepped forward. She declared that, as the older sister of the late Ifeoma, she would gladly take the child into her home. To the family, it sounded like an act of kindness. Many praised her willingness, and she smiled gracefully, hiding the selfish calculations running through her mind. Amaka moved into Aunty Ngozi's household, carrying nothing but a small bag of clothes and a heart heavy with grief. At first, she hoped her aunt would show her love and comfort. But soon, reality revealed itself. Instead of comfort, Amaka found cruelty. Each morning before the sun rose, Aunty Ngozi would rouse her from sleep with a sharp voice. "Amaka, stand up. Are you here to sleep your life away? Go and fetch water." Bleary-eyed, Amaka would stumble to her feet and carry the heavy jerrycan to the stream. By the time she returned, sweat dripping down her forehead, her cousins would still be asleep. She would then sweep the compound, wash their clothes, and prepare breakfast before she was allowed to get ready for school. Her cousins, neatly dressed in ironed uniforms and carrying packed lunches, would leave the house with their mother's blessings. Amaka, on the other hand, often ran barefoot to school, hungry and weary, her uniform worn thin and her books falling apart. When neighbors asked why Amaka looked so unkempt, Aunty Ngozi would reply sweetly, "Oh, children of these days, they don't know how to take care of themselves. But don't worry, I am trying my best." Her words deceived the community, who continued to hold her in high regard. But Amaka carried the weight of cruelty in silence. At night, after the day's chores were done, she would curl up on a thin mat in the corner of the room. Sometimes she cried softly, wishing her parents were still alive to hold her. Whenever her aunt heard her, Ngozi would scold harshly. "Stop crying. Do you think tears will bring your parents back? If you don't stop, I will give you something to cry about." The little girl learned to swallow her pain. Weeks turned into months, and Amaka's suffering grew. She ate last after everyone else had finished, often left with scraps. Her body became thinner, her once bright eyes dulled with sadness. At school, she struggled to concentrate, her mind weighed down by exhaustion and hunger. Yet she never complained. Somewhere deep inside, she carried the hope that one day things might change. But though Amaka remained silent, others had begun to notice. The neighbors, who saw her running errands from dawn till dusk, shook their heads in pity. They whispered among themselves but hesitated to confront Ngozi, fearing her sharp tongue and polished public image. Amaka's teachers noticed too, her faded uniform, her constant tiredness, the way she sometimes dozed off during lessons. The breaking point came one afternoon. Amaka had gone to school without breakfast. As the day dragged on, her stomach growled louder, and her head began to spin. During the mathematics lesson, she swayed, then collapsed to the floor. Panic spread through the classroom. Children screamed, and Mrs. Ngozi, her class teacher, rushed to her side. They sprinkled water on her face until she stirred weakly, whispering, "I'm hungry." That simple confession broke the teacher's heart. Later that day, Mrs. Ngozi decided to pay a visit to Aunty Ngozi's home. She was welcomed with a smile, as Ngozi tried to maintain her reputation. "Oh, Madam Teacher, what an honor. Please come in." But as she stepped inside, the truth became clear. The house was comfortable, well furnished and stocked, but in the corner sat Amaka, washing a heap of clothes with tired hands. Her clothes were shabby, her body frail. It was evident she was not treated as one of the family. "Amaka," the teacher said softly, "why didn't you tell me things were this bad?" Before the girl could answer, Ngozi cut in sharply. "Don't mind her, Madam Teacher. Children of nowadays, they exaggerate everything. I take care of her like my own." But Mrs. Ngozi was not convinced. She had seen enough. The next day, she went straight to the welfare office. She reported everything she had witnessed: the fainting, the hunger, the chores, the neglect. The officials promised to investigate, and soon they arrived at Aunty Ngozi's house unannounced. Ngozi was furious. She shouted, denied, and even tried to bribe the officers with sweet words. But the evidence was undeniable. Amaka's thin frame, her poor condition, and the testimonies of neighbors and teachers all painted the truth. Within days, Amaka was taken from her aunt's custody and placed in the care of a kind foster family. The news spread like wildfire across the town. Suddenly, the woman who had once been praised as respectable was exposed as cruel. The community turned against her, shaking their heads in disappointment. "Imagine. We thought she was so good-hearted," they murmured. "But see how she treated her own sister's child. God will judge her." Aunty Ngozi's mask of respectability was torn off. No longer was she admired, instead, she was avoided and shamed. As for Amaka, her life slowly transformed. In her new home, she was welcomed with open arms. She was given clean clothes, nourishing meals, and above all, love. At first, she was shy, unable to believe the kindness was real. But as the days turned into weeks, she began to smile again. Her laughter, once buried by sorrow, returned like the song of a bird after a storm. One evening, as she sat under the mango tree with her foster siblings, she whispered a quiet prayer of thanks for her parents' memory, for the people who had rescued her, and for the chance to live again without fear. For the first time since tragedy struck, Amaka felt hope bloom in her heart.